I would like to address maybe to Khristof. Khristof Van de Reck, who was one of the first who spotted actually blockchain as a technology. Why blockchain? Why is it so special? Why businesses need to implement it? Why there is so hype now about integration like blockchain name into the companies? Because actually it's similar to .com thing a few years ago. And why at Davos this year we had blockchain that was the most used word after a name of one president that I wouldn't name now. So, not what, it wasn't Russian president actually. So why blockchain? What is so special about blockchain? Why businesses need blockchain?
Well, as you said, blockchain is gaining a lot of attention. I think a lot of people still have to really understand the true value of blockchain. But just like most businesses have their SQL database or an Oracle database or something, I think blockchain will sooner or later become part of the database stack that a company has. And so maybe even like within bigger enterprises, they will probably have more than one blockchain. But it's a pretty tough question to answer.
Here we are. Welcome.
It's a pretty tough question to answer, but in the end, blockchain can provide a lot of value within, like, first of all, I think improving existing business processes, like improving administrative processes and onboarding people easier and improving all kinds of other internal processes, but also it can enable a lot of innovation. And I think that's where a lot of people are still having difficulties in really understanding what kind of new business models they can add to what they're already doing, and how this should work really. And from my end also, when we talk to businesses, it's really difficult because you need a lot of business intelligence specifically to the industry to really know where this potential is situated. But as soon as people really in the industry itself really understand what the true value of blockchain is, they will more or less automatically surface. That's my belief.
Thank you very much. Actually, as a founding member and a regional head for Europe of NEM, that is, well, the P2P cryptocurrency and blockchain platform, you are working on envisioning a realistic future for Bitcoin adoption. I took this from your LinkedIn. So yeah, what is the realistic?
Blockchain adoption, I would say, yes.
What did I say, sorry?
Sorry?
What did I say?
Bitcoin.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
It was Freud, I think, error. Sorry. So what is the realistic future for blockchain adoption?
Well, one of the reasons I put that on my LinkedIn is because a lot of people are caught in the whole hype thing, and they just, how should I say, they get, like, one of the first things, I think, more or less everybody goes a little bit through that process. Like, first you learn a little bit about blockchain, you're intrigued. Then the next step is like you get all kinds of crazy ideas that this technology can enable. And then I think that the third phase is when you start to realize that a lot of these crazy ideas are actually either you're going to get in trouble with regulation, or you're going to get in trouble with a technology that's still pretty immature, that's actually getting quite complex quite easily if you start to do stuff that has a lot of complexity. So that's more or less the reason why I put it on my LinkedIn, because I really like to take an approach where it's possible to do implementation today and not do some crazy stuff that might end up, like in most cases, the crazy wild ideas, which are sometimes really, really nice to see, obviously. But most of them end up in, yeah, not really adoption, but experiments where hopefully people have learned from some mistakes. I prefer to take an easy approach, starting with a small use case and then expanding on that.
Very interesting point. Thank you very much. I would like to address another person who spotted the blockchain potential for businesses quite early on. So Louise de Bruin, that is blockchain leader for Europe at IBM Digital Operations. So what did actually attract you to the blockchain technology in the first place? And how would you identify actually which businesses need blockchain solution implementation?
I need a microphone.
We have also, thank you so much.
Thank you, and sorry for being late. So, yeah, what attracted me to blockchain in the first place? I had a friend who owed me money and for a dinner, and it was in 2012, and he decided to pay me in Bitcoin, and the rest is history. I got hooked and fascinated. Yeah, but yeah, as far as the question comes, what does IBM, a big corporate, do with blockchain? That was our next question. How do you translate a technology as disruptive as Bitcoin was for the financial industry? How do you translate that to other business processes just beyond payment? And so basically we saw that it is across industry. Every industry is impacted by it. Every business process is impacted by it. And we very quickly learned that we need a open technology for that. We went for a specific approach with the Linux Foundation. Hyperledger Fabric is a tool that allows you to build business-grade blockchains. And that's really what IBM is totally focused on. Very concrete projects. We have thousands of people already working on very concrete blockchain implementations. For instance, food safety with Walmart, with Maersk. We have a joint venture with a blockchain application for reducing cost in logistics systems, cost of container shipment. With governments in the Netherlands, we have together with the police department, Department for Vehicle and Life and vehicle and driver's licenses and insurance companies, we have a vehicle crime reduction blockchain project going. So we have lots of very concrete blockchain projects that have little or nothing to do with cryptocurrencies actually, but make a real impact already. So yeah, that's really is fascinating and driving me along. It's really the focus on industry-grade blockchains. What you said earlier is very true. There are lots of experiments that end up on the heap of disillusions. We are very much focused on how we can make now blockchains that really work. And we have chosen for a specific path for that, the Linux Foundation's Hyperledger technology. It's not the end and all of it, but it's definitely one that really works right now.
Should I maybe ask a question on your? I mean, we hear from our customers that IBM's approach is relatively predatory, right? In that they kind of using, I mean, and this is just what we hear, right? But that they're using Hyperledger as a mechanism to sell infrastructure. And binding people to sort of a 5-year contract, right? And 5 years I mean, January for us was a long year. February was a long year. 5 years in blockchain is almost unheard of. I mean, what would your answer be to something like that?
Well, it's the first time I hear us. I've heard us being spoken to as a dinosaur, that we're dancing dinosaurs nowadays. Predator, I haven't heard yet. No, blockchain is an open technology. We're totally dedicated to open source, not only in blockchain technology, but beyond that as well. So there's no lock-in if you deal with IBM on blockchain. We realize that it's a tsunami that's coming. We have to adapt to that. We don't have a prescribed business model, how it's going to work. Of course, we try and are successful in selling a lot of infrastructure that IBM has and on which Hyperledger works very well, which is great, but it's not a predatory. We want to work with an ecosystem of partners. That's why we're also driving the Hyperledger Foundation's, the Linux Foundation's Hyperledger project, where lots of companies, also competitors of ours, and also colleagues, customers such as UBS are also working with us on it. So I think that's the answer.
Thank you.
So are you looking at any other distributed ledger technologies and protocols other than Hyperledger?
All the time.
Okay.
We're looking at it all the time. We're working at the moment mainly with Hyperledger. But for as an example, we have a combination project called ClickX. It's a combination of central banks in Polynesia and in the Pacific, where we also work with Stellar and Lumen. So it's not just Hyperledger, but we're looking beyond that as well. Yes.
So Daniel, question for you. Daniel Haudenschild, CEO of Swisscom Blockchain AG. So what are your favorite solutions based on blockchain? And what do you think that actually every business can implement blockchain, or is there some limitations for which project actually needs this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a massive amounts of limitations. I think blockchain is a hammer, right? We see it. I mean, so I came from 20 years of Ernst & Young, right? So a big four consultancy, mostly in banking and financial services, right? So with that perspective, you see an awful lot of mess, messy integration, messy, sloppy processes, mergers, acquisitions, central strategies, decentral strategies, and the mess that's left behind. A couple global financial crises and a few bubbles later, nothing's really cleaned up, and people kind of sweep under the rug, right? And then you come to this sort of pristine clarity of blockchain. You begin to think that it's a panacea solution for everything, and it's not. It has a specific, very, very viable applications, and if you have any hope for implementing it, you need to understand what that the viable application actually results in a business case that can calculate and that can make money. And if it doesn't, then you'll never get much out of the starting gates, right? So that's where it begins. What application? The why blockchain has to be the construct of the things. We've sometimes been in beauty parades against other providers, and when it comes to the why blockchain question, you know, ours begins with a financial calculation, and theirs begins with the vision of the world of tomorrow, when, you know, wonderful world of technology will be connected to everything, and your refrigerator will order milk by itself, right? And for us, that's not grounded enough, right? Because what we do at Swisscom Blockchain is we build the production applications for blockchains for some of the larger consortiums and some of the larger ICOs that are coming through. And what they're concerned with is confidentiality, privacy, GDPR, regulatory necessity, right? And then you realize that you know, good blockchains are extremely difficult really to kind of call into life. And if you're not sure, and they're expensive, right? And it's not going to happen for free. Even though it seems like money's on the street with ICOs, it's still not cheap to run and operate a distributed ledger. So they have to be financially viable. And then it becomes an interesting question, right? And I think it's interesting to have somebody from UBS here, right? Because what we see at the moment, especially in our banking environment, is a little bit of a you know, it's like the river in Egypt, right? It's, you know, there's nowhere near the embrace that ICOs are being able to do, where you have 20 people in a room saying, yes, 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 you know, we've got a bucket of money, who do we point it on to get things moving, and we know this is going to work, right? Whereas if you come to some of our traditional Swiss banking customers, and not UBS, of course, but the others, right, what you have is 20 people in a room saying, no, 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 and this is why it'll never work here, right? And the answer is that if they don't start changing the way they think, these people who are saying yes will find a way to erode the foundation. So it's integrate or die. Maybe not involve, but you have to actually figure out where the blockchain makes sense in your business. And then you can't just be one lunatic who's the blockchain guy who annoys everybody, walking around saying we should do blockchain with this in the company. It has to have, you know, the correct number of sponsorships from senior executives in the banking environment to attack their most profitable profit centers and begin to dismantle them with distributed technology. Right?
Integrate or die. I think it's the best motto for blockchain integration. Do you have your favorite case?
I mean, so I like the ones that just kind of take a low-hanging fruit and kill it, right? International remittance, $17 trillion use case made easy by companies like EverX and Ripple and Stellar Lumens, right? Brilliant, right? I mean, I get on the train in the morning and I sometimes get a coffee at Starbucks, right? I haven't been able to in the last couple of days because there's too many people in line, right? And I'm afraid I'm going to miss my train, so I don't go into the line. And then I took a look while I was waiting in the cold, watching the happy people getting their coffee, and I saw, you know, like the line is actually created by these two big Cisco system registers with these little satellites of payment mechanisms around them. And the line is this kind of unnatural barrier because of the payment applications, you know, and the infrastructure behind those, between somebody helping you get what you want. In a natural retail organization, I mean, think of the coffee machine takes up as much space at the counter at Starbucks as the payment platform. That's completely unnecessary, right? And super expensive, right? So, you know, and it creates this asocial thing where, let's say, a more introverted person would say, oh, I don't want to wait in line. What if somebody asks me a question, you know? And it's all completely unnecessary. You could imagine a Starbucks working on a completely different, you know, sort of environment where it's much more comfortable to come in, you get your coffee right away, you pay, and out, right? And then you start to see, like once you start to get the blockchain eyes, you kind of see all these different places where, you know, there will be dismantling of the current infrastructure.
Great. Okay, so let's address the banking industry. Bannwart, that is the head of strategic innovations and market development at UBS, Switzerland. So could you tell us, like, why banks are now in need of blockchain, and what are the biggest challenges now into integrating blockchain solutions into banking industry? Do you think that now traditional banks are kind of difficult partner in order to convince them to integrate these things, or on the contrary?
Well, I would say it's not just about the question of integration, but I would rather kind of go a step back and with a little bit of background. UBS started actually very early to investigate in the technology.
When? Do you have
that was already a couple of years ago, where we built up innovation labs, particularly personnel dedicated to blockchain exploration. Also, UBS is present in different cases, investigating different technology platforms as well, to basically, as I said, first get an understanding how it does work, evaluate the technologies, accompany them as they evolve, and the most important, to figure out where blockchain actually makes sense. And I would say it's not just a use case to find, as you said, the lowest hanging fruit, where it's a simple use case to put the blockchain on it, because that doesn't necessarily mean the benefit for a client or for the users is better. So where we look at blockchain cases, it's actually not, we look not at the technology, basically use blockchain for a case, but we rather look at blockchain as an enabler to bring a better use case out and create either something new or make something much more efficient. And that's why I'd rather say we're coming from the value proposition we can bring to our customers, and if blockchain is the right enabler for that, then we do it on blockchain. If not, we stay with the current systems. And I also have to say, I'm doubting that everything which is being done on blockchain currently is effectively better in the end, just because you use blockchain, as it needs to make sense. And maybe now coming back to where we stand and what we're looking at, we clearly see the added value of blockchain in multi-stakeholder environments, where we generally have like two-legged transactions, being it payment versus payment, delivery versus payment, but we more see it in cases where we have complex operations, particularly where we have like manual steps or where we have synchronization, reconciliation issues across the system. And there we see blockchain definitely as a strong enabler to create something new. Now, when it comes into how to implement that, it's clearly blockchain has its advantages, but blockchain needs a network. And obviously in the whole financial industry, it's a huge network and has many, many participants. And it's pretty obvious there will never be a big bang just to change everything overnight. So the technology needs to be as such that it can start with certain use cases, start with certain a subset of it, and you need to connect it to the legacy environment. And if this is not possible, you will not create a necessary critical mass for a blockchain platform to establish. So from our point of view, it's really critical. The technology has to bring an added value. It has to bring clearly financial added value for the customers, for the banks, for the industry. And you need to be able to gradually implement it and progress, because otherwise, it's like a colleague of mine always said, the person with the very first fax machine was a really poor guy. He invested money, but he had no other person to send a fax to, although it was much better than the telex. So it really needs to, you need to have sufficient counterparties with the same technology in order to make it viable, and therefore it needs to have a simple connectivity or an integration to legacy backend systems.
Swiss banking is like one of the base of, I think, the international financial market, and a lot of people think that Swiss banking is kind of conservative sector. Do you think actually that banking is conservative or rather progressive and more open to new technologies as blockchain?
Well, I think you cannot just put it in one box on its own. Obviously, banking has to do a lot with trust, and you only build trust through time, and by basically, how to say, being a trusted entity where you know, particularly as it's about assets, as it's about money, that my money is in a safe place. If you're just swinging wildly around, this is not the way how we can create trust with a wider public. So that's a very valuable asset you have and which you need to preserve. So that's kind of going a bit back to what I explained before. Yes, banks are innovative. They explore new technologies. They also experiment with new technologies, but you always still have to safeguard the values you have as well with your clients, and therefore it's pretty critical to look at how you actually progress towards new solutions. So it's a bit of a balance act, but you cannot neither say conservative nor innovative on its own. You have to look at the both spectrum.
Interesting point. Thank you very much. I would like now to talk about more specifically about tokenization. Now we have Igor Khmel, that is founder and CEO of Bankex, that is actually based on a blockchain technology that allows to tokenize various types of assets. So what about tokenization? Do we have the recipe to understand why a certain business needs a tokenization, and what are the challenges and what are the advantages?
Yeah, sure. So tokenization, it's in our opinion, it's the new life for securitization, and we're in the business of creating of structured finance and creating enabling new asset classes, enabling because of blockchain. So there are a few problems with traditional securitization. It's one of them. It's high overhead costs. So you need about 8 different members participate in the trustees, payment agents, a lot of lawyers. So it's that's why it's a lot of overheads, and that's why it requires a lot of assets altogether in order to make this happen. And also it's very standardized and very traditional and very regulated part of finance. So not so many classes, not so many assets can really make it. So it's a mortgage, auto loans, credit cards, but there are a huge amount of other asset classes that also basically looking for to get to this market, and we're in the business of helping them and decreasing the barriers of entering to the capital markets, and also working. So one of thing is decreasing the barriers because of the lowering the costs, and second one it's working with decentralized assets. So you don't have to have one bank, for instance, that has the whole portfolio of mortgage. You can work with many banks have distributed portfolios. So those two things enables a lot of new very interesting assets and a lot of very cool things. So right now we are working on 2 new asset classes. One of them is movie financing. So we do this as a joint venture with the leading Hollywood producers.
How did you convince them?
They basically they have the experience of raising capital from Mid East, from Asia, and they see that there is a lot of demand there to get to Hollywood. But for many people, outsiders, it's not clear how to get there. And also many newcomers, they're losing money there because they don't have insights. For instance, you're not supposed to do picking of the movies. You better to invest in slates. You need to have a deal of share of the studios, because the studios usually do not lose money. So all those things for insiders only. So we enable kind of decentralized fund for people who want to come outside Hollywood and invest there. So right now we are raising both utility and security tokens to run this platform, and they will be security fund, 200 million for the beginning, and hopefully later $1 billion.
Do you think that marketing is an important part in promoting new tokens? Because like 9 out of 10 ICOs are actually not reaching the point of success. And can it be related to the marketing thing, and maybe at this point, like Hollywood company, studio that is implementing blockchain is more damned to be successful than any other technology that maybe is even greater but doesn't have this marketing tools?
Yeah, so the marketing tools are important for traditional ICOs. It's that basically last year happened. This year it will be more and more asset-backed ICOs and for big companies. And for those ICOs, it's with the sizes, with the tickets like 50 million plus, it's mostly driven by institutional money and wealth. And these guys, of course, they're influenced by marketing, but what is more important is more traditional institutional sales and kind of private wealth management addressing them. So what is more important than marketing right now? It's to be compliant with the regulation, and we are spending a lot of resources in order to kind of understand how to connect and integrate business integration. So how to connect existing regulation framework, especially in the United States, with the blockchain reality. So we are working on applying regulation D and regulation S to raise the funds to the tokenization units. We're applying regulation A plus in the S in order to make the security token offerings. So this helps us to talk with really big funds like Fortress, Guggenheim, many banks that have hundreds of millions funds implemented, but they're looking for the right regulation framework and the right legal paperwork done in order to invest in that. And this is the key to biggest implementation and biggest exposure for.
Interesting point. Actually, I also wonder why regulation for the decentralized technology is actually it's dependent on the local authorities always. I don't know, my question maybe for Luis. So do you think that blockchain regulation will in the future attain kind of international level, or the development of the regulations will happen on the regional level? And so what are the barriers and the advantages also of this development?
Oh, good question. Do we have 2 hours, 3 hours? Yeah. No, so
Almost.
Yeah.
If you don't want to have lunch.
This is, of course, a big question how it exactly is going to develop. At the moment, we see a lot of efforts on standardization, coordination in this area, which is good to have that discussion, but you have to be very careful that it won't stifle development. So there's an equivalence, balance to be found there. And so on the European Union level, for instance, there's a lot of discussion about exactly what the role of regulators are, and on national levels as well, and there's a discussion as well. It will also very much depend on the blockchain application that you have. Some are actually transgressing into very regulated areas, such as finance. And like I mentioned before, the vehicle crime reduction, there's also a lot of regulation, but less. So it depends very much on the business area where you're in. And I think the role of regulators should definitely be one, and I think Switzerland is a very good example of that, to positively think with people on how to enable this and not be a stifling factor. Which is in some jurisdictions also the case. But at the moment we find a lot of cooperation. Blockchain helps integrate chains that are previously unintegratable, as people thought. It's very difficult to bring all sorts of parties together. And regulators have an issue in managing that, and they now see that blockchains are forming new ecosystems in which they get transparent insight. So it, to some extent, facilitates their role as well. So at the moment, we in IBM see a lot of collaboration with regulators throughout the world.
Yes, that's life. Okay. Moritz, you're working with economy of things. So what about this sector, and what is your recipe for the sustainable business model and integrating blockchain solutions?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm working for Bosch Digital. Especially, really, we want to come up with new applications for the economy of things. So basically, the next step after the Internet of Things. And so far, I think there is no one recipe to reach it. I think there's the need for that, like different ways have to develop until this. This depends on, okay, you have to find the right use case. You have to do a lot on the technology side to really bring it to the next and productive level. But also cultural-wise, there needs to be a certain mindset in the people's head to get the real value out of blockchain and what's basically able to build, and then to be sustainable. So at the end of the thing, I think like you can basically start with what you already have seen is this tokenization thing that already provides a certain value, especially when you start just interacting or transacting a value between the physical and the digital world. Basically e-car wallets, what you see. Then the next step could be like this notarization service, where we are actually also active in. We build currently a service for certifying car data to end odometer fraud. And this is basically a use case where we think, okay, this is not just because we want to apply blockchain, but also because there is a real value behind it, and only through applying this we can capture this value, especially with the new GDPR regulations coming up. So if you want to sell your car, and then you need to build up a certain trust level with a potential car buyer. Therefore, you can basically get a certificate from Bosch and to show, okay, this is the recorded odometer history, and this shows proof that this has not been manipulated, and it also gives the potential car buyer always this the possibility to look at the blockchain and see, okay, this history is correctly stored there, because we are using their public blockchain. And then we come to the point, okay, after this digital notary service, then there are these smart contracts that already provide a higher value and cater for a more sustainable, let's say, blockchain basis. When it comes, for example, to P2P energy trading, where people among each other they trade energy. And then you have decentralized platforms like the Airbnb, but not monopolized. And then towards the economy of things, where then you have really autonomous transactions between physical devices and even between humans. And there you have examples like when an e-car, for example, trades energy, starts trading energy, and then I think then
infinite
we really reached a certain point where blockchain is not used only for blockchain, but really we have new business model on top, and then I think we reach a really sustainable environment.
Fascinating. Well, great. Actually, we've talked about different sectors, not all of them. So we've talked about entertainment and financial industry and technologies and IT. There is also healthcare. That is a very, very big potential of blockchain. Anyway, I think that we will wrap up with a question to everybody. Let's try to make a list, like checklist for a company that is doubting whether to integrate blockchain solution. So checklist of things that a company should know before integrating blockchain. And then all the questions from the audience, I think that will take place during the lunch. So just one phrase from everybody. We'll begin, I don't know, maybe this part was more silent last 5 minutes, so I am inviting Beat to begin. Checklist for the companies.
No,
Well, it boils a bit down to what was said before. You need interoperability between systems, and you need easy integration with existing systems. Otherwise, it's very difficult to start with.
Thank you. So first point, I hope you all note this.
So, in all honesty, I don't really, although I have my background in aviation where checklists are like, they use it for everything, I don't believe it's really possible to use checklists for to see whether. But I think the main thing is basically have a problem that needs to be solved. If you're not solving a problem with blockchain, then probably you need to reassess whether you're on the right track. And I think that's a very important thing to
find a problem first, or create it. Thank you.
I think it's with us, it's always just do the math and do the math. Make sure you can calculate the financial benefits of going down this route.
Thank you. Igor?
Yeah, so just to remember that blockchain, as any new technology, it requires basically double work at the beginning. So you will never make this to the commercial usage before make sure that it works. So for some period, you will have to run both systems, and you should to be ready to this extra cost done, and there will be a lot of so many people against that. So that's why the CEO should to make sure that the organizational change happens.
Thank you. Moritz?
Yeah, as the right use case was already mentioned, I would say then, yeah, focus on technology, either blockchain or just any other storage service. Why not? It could also be better and also easier to implement. And then focus not really on the hype, but do your homework. So no ICOs, and start exploring, I would say. Be open and not to be disruptive later on. So start thinking about new business models.
Thank you. Luis?
Thank you. Well, being the last, the checklist has been completed. I agree with everything that's been said before. Just one question. One remark on your question. You said a company. Basically, a blockchain is always something between companies. It's always an ecosystem of parties. So I think it's a checklist for an ecosystem of companies rather than for one.
Very true point. Thank you so much. Well, I will cite one of the speakers of the panel, integrate or die. That is my favorite motto now for blockchain solutions. Thank you so much for this wonderful discussion. And sorry for not leaving time for your questions, but I think that you will have the opportunity to do this during the lunch break. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucrezia, Kristina. So let's